I'm Laurie L. Frank with West End Advisory Group. Welcome to our financial literacy series for 2025. In our first webinar, we'll discuss how much you might need to save for your retirement. At West End Advisory Group, we have a plan-first approach to investing because we believe knowing how much money you need and when you will need it are important factors in your investment success. Joining us today is the owner of West End Advisory Group, Joe Roddy. Joe is a certified financial planner and has been in the financial industry for over 30 years. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website. If you have questions during today's presentation, please use the raise hand button in your webinar controls and we'll unmute you. Now I'll turn it over to our host, Joe Roddy.
Thanks, Laurie. Appreciate everybody joining us tonight. This is the first of three related webinars that we're going to do. We have lots of questions about what's the best way to retire, how much money do I need to retire, as I'm retiring, should I invest? And we thought we'd break these down to about 15 or 20 minute segments and record them as part of our financial literacy program. We're recording today's seminar, and what we'll do is post it out on our website so you'll have access to it in the future as well as anyone else. Today's webinar is how much do you need to retire. The next in our series, next quarter, which is which account is right for me. We'll talk about the difference between saving inside of Roths versus traditional retirement accounts versus saving outside of a retirement account. That webinar will be at 2 o'clock on July 16th. And then the final one will be more or less the investment basics. How's a stock? What's a bond? How should we use those various tools to prepare for our retirement? That one will be the third of this series, and that'll be on noon, November the 5th. But for today, let's go ahead and get started. And I'll share my screen now and we'll walk through how we go ahead and begin calculating and estimating how much we need to have for retirement. We're going to begin by this. How much is enough for retirement? Again, my name's Joe Roddy, and I'm with West End Advisory Group. Here's our contact information and our legal disclosure there. Let's start off by talking about longevity and the impact it's had on our retirement. This graph is meant to show you the change in longevity. Back in the 30s, the life expectancy of a typical U.S. citizen was about 60 years old. Today, it is over 70, 77.2 is the life expectancy. But perhaps most important for us who are thinking about retirement, if you're age 50 and male, you'll have about a 40% chance of living to age 90. If you're female, you have a 50% chance of living to age 90. In other words, if you make the longer you live, the longer your life expectancy is. And of course, the cost of being retired for 25 or 30 years is obviously much higher than what it would have been back in the 30s when your retirement might have only lasted a year or two. That has put tremendous pressure on the retirement system. And it has changed the way our country and the rules and the corporations and our business owners have gone ahead and began funding for retirement. What we have in this slide is the defined benefit plan. Those are the old traditional retirement plans that were dominated the retirement market for many, many years. The defined benefit plan, that term comes from, you would work for a company for a number of years. Each company would have a retirement plan, and the retirement plan had a formula, and it is in that formula that the amount that you received in retirement was determined. As an example, if you worked for a company for 30 years, you might have 1 or 2% of your final salary for each year that you worked. So the retirement was the benefit you received was defined by the pension plan. Those plans are largely obsolete. There are still some of them that are present. Notably here in the state of Missouri, most teachers, public school teachers still have those types of plans. Some public employees or unionized employees, but they, and some large corporations still have them, but they are largely obsolete. And that is because the cost of retirement has gone up so much. When these things were set up, as we said in the previous slide, people were expected to live in retirement for only a couple years. Now people are living much longer, and the cost of these plans are very, very expensive. If you think about what these plans did, is as much of the decision making for these plans was placed on the um, corporation's responsibility. They would hire actuaries, they would hire investment managers, they would determine how much money was in the plan, and basically those plans, the participants in those plans had very few decisions to make, and that dominated the retirement industry, the retirement plans in our country for many, many years. As the cost of retirement went up, the cost of these plans became prohibitive, and many, many employers have cut back on them or eliminated them altogether. And they replaced them with what we refer to as defined contribution plans. Defined contribution plans are the are no longer do we have a formula that defines how much you're going to get. Usually there is a formula defining how much is being contributed to the plan. And now all the responsibility for retirement and figuring out how much to save has been shifted from the employer to the employee. No longer will the employer hire an actuary. No longer will they hire investment managers. No longer will they determine how much to put in for the employees. It's now up to the employee to determine that. And 401k type of plans for for the for-profit industry, 403bs for the nonprofit industries, those are types of defined contribution plans. When you enroll in those plans, you're telling the employer how much to contribute. Now the responsibility on how much you contribute and how those funds are invested is being shifted away from the company and to the individual. And therefore, it's much more the responsibility of the individual to determine how much they need to save. So what we're going to do now is go through and talk about how much you need. Typically, the typical person retired today needs about 75 to 80% of their pre-retirement income. That's the national average. And if you're years away from retirement, that's probably a good number to use. Why is 75 or 80% versus the 100% that you're used to making now? Well, there's a few things that change in retirement that reduce your expenses. The first of those is taxes. Most people, when they retire, are going to end up being in a slightly lower income tax bracket. A portion of their retirement will be from Social Security, and depending upon the amount of income you have, your Social Security can either be income tax free or at least partially income tax free. So you pay fewer taxes. Additionally, while you're working, you're actually paying into Social Security. Social Security has a 7.65% for Social Security and Medicare that you're paying in, and you'll no longer have to pay that when you're receiving money from your retirement accounts or when you're retired. You no longer have earned income, and you're no longer obligated to pay Social Security taxes. And the other thing is your expenses simply are lower. Generally, people realize or it's experienced that in early years of retirement, many retirees are doing the bucket list of things that they haven't done or had hoped to do while they were working, but perhaps never had the time. As a result, the expenses tend to be a little bit higher at the early retirement as they begin traveling or doing those things on their bucket list. Later in retirement, they become a little more sedentary or complacent, and after they've checked off a few of the list, are more satisfied staying home. But those early expenses are then replaced with higher healthcare costs. So that's kind of what you might expect expense-wise. Again, the national average is about 75 to 80%. That's something good to shoot for if you're years away. And of course, as you get into the last year or two, we strongly encourage people to measure twice and cut once and really begin understanding what their budgets are and tracking their spending because everybody's situation is different. If you've been raising children, your expenses may go down somewhat in retirement. If you've owned your home and your mortgage is paid off, they may go down. On the other hand, if you're renting, they may stay high or go higher. So everyone is different. The 75 to 80% number is a good one to shoot for. Now, if that's what your expenses are, let's kind of walk through an example. Let's say that you have household income of $125,000. 80% of that would be $100,000. This is deliberately arranged example here to try to keep the numbers as simple as possible. So we're going to walk through to kind of see how all these pieces of income might fit in this example. So in that example, we're looking to replace somebody who was, while they were working, had a household income of 125,000. In retirement, their goal is to make about 80% of that, which would be 100,000. When we talk about where the retirement income comes from, we usually talk about the three-legged stools, and that's Social Security or the government. The second leg is your employer-sponsored retirement plans, and the third leg of the three-legged stool would be savings and investments. And we're going to go through each of these three legs here tonight, and we're kind of created a dummy example here of how that might look. So breaking that down further, we have Social Security here. Graphically, we want to kind of illustrate this. Then you have your retirement plans. You have the old-fashioned defined benefit plans. In our example tonight, we'll have a small defined benefit plan just for example's sake. And then we'll compare that and we'll add to that the defined contribution plans. Most defined contribution plans today are now offering two options. One is the traditional 401k or 403b. And then in more recent years, we have the Roth. The subject of the next seminar that we do next quarter, we'll talk about the appropriateness or the differences in the strengths of those. Many people still today do not have retirement plans sponsored by their employer. And so they have to do things on their own. And the government has set up their ability of creating their own retirement plan. That's called IRA or the individual retirement plan. And the government has those set up so that you can do traditional and Roth. And if you've maxed out those, we use a term in our industry called non-qualified retirement plans. Those that would mean money that you save that is not inside of a retirement plan. So we're going to go through these and take a look at how these might go ahead and help us meet that $100,000 goal. The first leg of the stool was Social Security, and that's the one that we're going to talk about first. While you're working, you're paying 7.65% into Social Security and Medicare. 6.2% of that is for Social Security, and that's the retirement function. Social Security provides not only a retirement vehicle, but it provides a survivor vehicle for young children or a surviving spouse, and it also has a disability component. Today, we're going to talk about the retirement component. When you begin taking Social Security, it will be at least partially tax exempt. They kind of referred to as means testing. Folks who make a lot of money in retirement will have a portion of their income, portion of their Social Security will be taxable. The most that's taxable is 85%. For people of more modest incomes during retirement, their Social Security will be completely income tax free. The earliest you can take Social Security is age 62. However, if you take it at age 62, you're going to have a substantial reduction in what your full Social Security would be. It's about 30%. Your full retirement age at Social Security is 67 for most people. I'm 66. I'll be 67 here shortly, and I'm among the last people who get to take it uh, or age 70. So 67, excuse me. Full retirement is 67. If you begin taking Social Security before you're 67 and you continue to work, you have to worry about making too much money from your salary. So it's kind of a big 67 is an important thing. We're not going into great amount of detail on Social Security here. We're trying to hit the highlights. You can delay taking it past 67, but you must begin taking it by age 70. If you delay taking it, they'll actually give you a little bit of a bonus. It works out to be about 8% for each year that you delay up until age 70. To give you an idea, many people do take it before full retirement age, and the average Social Security check in this country is about $2,000. The other thing to remember about Social Security, particularly when it comes to planning for your retirement, is that it's a flat, it's referred to as a flat benefit. In other words, people who have lower incomes will have a higher percentage of that income replaced by Social Security than someone who has a high level of income. Think of it this way. If somebody had income of $20,000 a year and someone else had an income of $100,000 a year, the person with $100,000 a year will not receive 5 times as much from Social Security as the person making $20,000 a year. This is kind of important when we start thinking about that income replacement ratios that we were talking about earlier, where we wanted to replace about 80% of your income when you retire. In other words, people making higher level of income will need to have more income coming from non-Social Security sources. So let's continue with our example, and we'll say that our household is being more than in our example we're using is probably more than one person. They have $125,000 of household income. We talked about that earlier. Their goal is to replace 80% of that. That's about $100,000 that they're looking for in retirement. If the couple is receiving $48,000 from Social Security, they have a $52,000 gap after Social Security, and that's what we're going to be looking to fill. So $52,000 is kind of our bogey. Let's take a look and see how we might fill that in this example. Now we've just completed our Social Security segment, so we know that we've gotten that. Now we're looking at retirement plans that are sponsored by the employer. So we'll look at two types of retirement plans: the defined benefit plan and the defined contribution plan. In our example, we're going to go ahead and we're going to assume that in this case that they have a defined benefit or the traditional pension plan. The traditional pension plan is going to vary tremendously by employer. Each employer, if you remember, we called it defined benefit, and they had a formula in the plan. Each employer can design almost any type of formula they want, so it's going to vary dramatically. Some plans, for example, public employees typically have historically not been part of Social Security. In other words, if you're a public school teacher in the state of Missouri, you do not contribute to Social Security. Most private sector employers, though, do, however. The exception would be with railroads. Again, we're getting kind of down in the weeds here, but the pension plans are going to vary by employer. And some are covered by Social Security, some are not. And most cases, the pension plans that are sponsored by private employers do not have a cost of living adjustment. So they'll give you a flat amount, and it'll be that amount for as long as you retire, unlike Social Security, which does have cost of living. So going back to our example, let's say, and this is all just to walk us through how all these might work. The current household income is 125,000. Replacement goal is 80% or 100,000. Social Security is covering 48,000. In our example, we're going to say that there was a modest pension that was still available from the employer, and it was $12,000 a month. So now there's a gap of $40,000. And the question is how do we fill that gap, and how much money are we going to need to do that? So now we've covered the defined benefit plan, and we're going to fill that gap with our personal, either our personal savings or defined contribution plans. And how much do we need? If you will need to fill that gap. If you're retiring next year, you'd want to have 20 to 25 times that gap. So, and that's a significant amount of money. If the gap is $40,000, you're talking about needing almost 800,000 if you use the 20 time number. If you use the 25 and you want to be a little bit more cautious or safe, that number is now $1 million. Again, we used this trying to keep the numbers simple for everybody. The theory here is that at the 20 number, that's if you take if you took 5% and 20 times 5% is 1. So the idea is that you get a 5% distribution rate. So if you had $800,000 and were able to get 5%, the goal would be get the 5%, and that $40,000 would grow roughly the rate of inflation. In other words, you're pulling out 5% of $800,000, and you're hoping that your investment portfolio might grow several percent faster than that over a long period of time. If you wanted to be a little bit more conservative, that number might be 4%. So if you had $1 million, that would give you a 4% distribution rate on that would be $40,000. So that's the goal, is to try to get to those numbers. In this scenario, we're acting as if you're going to retire next year. In reality, if you're years away, the math on this gets a lot more complicated. What we do is we actually break it down and begin projecting year by year. Some people may have a substantial amount of money already saved. And there are a number of programs available out on the internet. The one that we use is called eMoney. But if you Google retirement calculators, and they will create they're designed to be a lot more flexible and dynamic. In other words, looking years ahead and adjusting to whatever your particular situation might be. This is a very simple situation where somebody was going to be retiring relatively soon. Now, what impacts how much you need to save? Well, obviously, inflation is part of it. How old it is when you retire, though. The longer you working and the later you retire, your life, years after retirement is going to be shorter. Whether or not you want to deplete your principal, if you have children and you're wanting to leave something for them, well, that's going to be a different set of assumptions. Or you'll have a different set of circumstances can have a large impact. Generally speaking, in our industry, if you took a look at a financial planning textbook, one of the rules of thumbs in there is that you should be trying to save about 10% your whole life. And if you're able to do that, then you should be okay. And then I just put in here, this is a link to our website. And again, this will be on our, this recording today will be on our website, so you'll be able to find this. But we have a very simplistic retirement calculator on our website if somebody wants to go in and begin playing around with it. Or certainly we work with people all the time and customize these, and the ones we use, eMoney, are even far more sophisticated than the one that's out on the website. Now, if we get back to, let me go back to this site. When we get to this slide, we talk about personal savings. Today we talked about how much you need to save and how much you might need in retirement. The topic of our next seminar is, as you're saving this money, does it make more sense to put it in a traditional IRA or a Roth, or even not in a retirement account at all? And that's going to be the topic of our next seminar is where's the best place to save this money at, and what are the characteristics of these various Roth versus traditional versus non-qualified. So with that, we're kind of wrapping up today's seminar. The next one will be which of those accounts is right for me, and that'll be on July 16th on 2025. And then we'll do our basics about how to invest, which you should be investing in stocks or bonds or money market funds or so forth, and we'll have a whole presentation on that. We then want to go ahead and thank everybody for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we will be posting this out on our website as soon as it gets through our compliance department. And Laurie will send out an email on that, and we'll be sending out other emails on our future ones. Again, thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and we will be hopefully seeing you soon in a couple months. Thank you.